Hello, thank you for joining me today as we walk through the first 8 verses of chapter 21 of the book of Revelation. And this is getting to really exciting stuff. I think some of the most exciting material in the entire Bible. Why? Because this is the culmination. This is the high point. I just think that it's not a coincidence that this is how the Bible ends. That these images, these pictures that are meant to just stick in our minds and to inspire us to worship, to glorify God, and to see things from a different point of view, from a different perspective, is where we are. This is a climax. It's the climax of all history. It's the climax of what God has been doing since the very beginning. So it's very, very exciting. I'm going to read these first 8 verses to you. I'm reading from the NIV. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Now the dwelling place of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.' He said to me, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. He who overcomes will inherit all of this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, and those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." Wow. Chapter 21, when he says, "Then I saw," this is the final "then I saw" in the book of Revelation. So this is the final vision, the culminating vision of all the visions. This is the culmination. And what we see in verses 1 through 8 are like an overview of the vision, and then he fleshes that vision out starting in verse 9 and going through till chapter 22. So this is like the overview, then he will flesh it out for us. So next week we will be talking about more of the details, but this is the culmination of the book. Now, he says, what did he see? A new heaven and a new earth. This tells us where we're going. The first heaven has passed away, the first earth has passed away. And I saw there was no longer any sea. Now that might sound weird to us. Why is there no sea? Well, in Jewish literature and apocalyptic literature, a lot of times the sea represented evil. And if you look even at the book of Revelation, like go back to chapter 12 and 13, and you'll see that the dragon stood by the side of the sea, and the beast came up out of the sea. So it doesn't have to do with God is against water. It's a symbolic picture of saying that all of the evil is gone. All of the source of evil is gone. Because what did we see in the last one? It was all thrown into the lake of fire. And so here we are in 21. All of this is gone, and now the holy city comes down. Babylon is destroyed. Babylon is in the lake of fire. Babylon has no power. Babylon is gone. The first heaven and the first earth have passed away. Now God brings down out of heaven the holy city, the new Jerusalem. And here's something really cool, and just to think about. God doesn't take his people out of the old creation and move them up into the new creation. So it's not about us going up to heaven. Rather, God finishes all of the work that needs to be done on earth, and then he descends with his holy city, his new heaven and new earth. He brings it to us as if we could get to him anyway. No, he brings it down to us. And so this is really a different picture, because we have always been taught it's about this being snatched up to heaven, snatching away, or going to be in heaven. But at the end, he is bringing it to us. To who? To his people. And what does it say about this holy city? The holy city is prepared like a bride. Who is the bride? The bride is the New Jerusalem. The bride is the holy city. And we're going to find out more about the bride coming up. But she is like a bride who's been prepared and beautifully dressed for her husband. Think about that image. Think about that. At a wedding, the big event is when the bride comes in. Every photographer, every videographer is looking to get the reaction of the husband when he sees his bride appear in the doorway. I've done a lot of weddings, and every time, because we have that tradition that the groom is not supposed to see his bride on the wedding day until she walks down the aisle. And so there's that moment that he's been waiting for, when all of a sudden she appears, and it's beautiful. It's an amazing thing, and we all know it. That's why when you're at a wedding, everyone's looking back and forth between the bride and the groom. We want to see the bride, but we want to see how the groom reacted, and every photographer is trying to get his reaction. Why? Because it's amazing. And so this is the picture that God's bride, God's city, has prepared itself like a bride. And just like the groom is just delighted to see his beautiful bride coming down the aisle, God delights in the coming of his city, of his New Jerusalem, and of his bride. And he says, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, who's this speaking? God speaks. God speaks several times in these verses here. And what does God say? Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. God speaks. What are we picturing here? We're thinking back to the Garden of Eden, when God created all of the creation, and he placed the man in the garden, and then he took the woman out of the man, and they were living in this beautiful garden, and God would come walk among the garden and speak to them. We're thinking of this image that he's created a new creation, and now he is going to dwell among his people. But now the thing that had separated them is gone. Now they can live in perfect peace and harmony. How? He is their God, and they is his people in a loving relationship. And then we get this beautiful promise that says, he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. One of the things that gives me great hope, whenever there are times of just immense sorrow or injustice or just terrible things that happen in the world, those terrible things are a result of sin and our sinfulness. So think about terrible things like terrorist attacks, 9/11, school shootings, all these terrible things that make us cry out and say, God, how long do we have to put up with this? This isn't how it's supposed to be. It isn't how it's supposed to be, and it's not how it's going to be. One of the things about God that we have to recognize is that God has the power to put things right that we cannot imagine ever being put right. I mean, I was in college when Columbine happened. It's impossible for me to really imagine how could God go back and make that right. But he can, because he has the power. He has the authority. He is the one in control of history, and he will wipe away every tear. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. That's just really good news. That is good news to all of us, that God has the power to make it all new, to make it all right, and to do away with the old, that separation, that, just brokenness. He has the power to heal it. I am making everything new. Then he said to me, it is done. Oh, you have heard anybody say that before? Jesus said it on the cross. When his work was finished, he said, it is finished. And now God's work through eternity is finished. And he says, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I'm the one with all authority. I'm the one who can do these things, because I am the beginning. I am the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. This reminds us of Jesus speaking to the woman at the well in John 4, when he says, I will give you living water, and you won't thirst again. Here we are. Anyone who is thirsty. Are you thirsty? Are you thirsty for God? Are you thirsty for his kingdom? Are you thirsty for his righteousness? Because to him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost. You don't pay for it. He paid for it. It's free. From the spring of the water of life. Now, I want you to pay attention to what he says in verse 7. This is an important verse. He says, he who overcomes. This little line is a connector. This line connects everything that's happening in chapters 21 to the end with the letters to the churches that we saw at the beginning. In the letters to the churches, to every church, he added something in there saying, to him who overcomes, I will. And it was different for every city, but there was a promise to each who overcomes. So when we see this, he who overcomes, we're now seeing the fulfillment of that promise to those people, to those churches. So it connects it, and it lets us know that this book is a message to the churches, which he said at the beginning, but we somehow forget, and we start thinking that it's this message for the end. No, it was a message for them. Right there in the situation they were living in, he is calling them to overcome now, not overcome in some future tribulation. Although, if you are living through some future tribulation, you're called to overcome. But you are called to overcome right now, if you are part of his church. So we see this connection. He who overcomes will inherit all of this. I'm fulfilling my promises. And as we go through, we'll see how he relates different things to those promises to the letters of the 7 churches. But we're not going to get into those details right now. But just recognize that he is bringing it back. And he's saying, you remember? In your letters, I said, to him who overcomes, I had these promises. And now, to him who overcomes, he will inherit all of this. and I will be his God, and he will be my son. God doesn't call us to be his slaves. God doesn't call us to be his servants. God calls us to be his son. And I think it's very interesting that he says, to he who overcomes, I'll give him the right to be there. I will be his God, and he will be my son. All of us will share in the inheritance that belongs to his only begotten Son. We are taken into Christ. And here we get that picture of the bride and groom again. And the husband and the wife become one flesh. Now Christ takes his bride and they become one flesh. And the bride becomes the son. And she inherits all that belongs to him. Everything that belongs to him belongs to her. All that belongs to the Father belongs to the Son and to the bride, who have been joined into one. So think about that unity and what God is doing. He makes us his sons. And then he ends these verses with a warning again. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderous, the sexually immoral, those who practice magical arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur, which is the second death. And so there's still a warning here. You are still called to overcome. These are God's promises for you. All of these things that are coming, you must overcome. You must not compromise. I say often that the Bible deals with three primary questions. It's not to say they're the only questions the Bible deals with, but I think they're the three major questions, the primary questions that the Bible deals with. It tells us who is God. It tells us who is man, or who are we, who are humans, who are human beings. And then third, what is the relationship between God and human beings? What is the relationship? And here we have an answer to that third question of, at least because we're seeing who God is, and we're seeing who people are, and we're seeing the relationship between them, and we're seeing what God intended from the very beginning. What is God's purpose? What is God's intention? The primary goal of God in the Bible is to live with and among his people, who he adopts as his sons, in his beautiful creation, in a loving relationship, and that we would give him worship as a response to his perfect love that he showers on us. He isn't hungry for our worship. He is hungry for our relationship, but worship comes out of that. Worship. We tend to reserve that word just for God. But when you think about relationships, think about a loving and faithful marriage. Doesn't the husband delight in the presence of his wife? Doesn't the wife delight in the presence of her husband? Doesn't the wife think her husband is just great? Doesn't the husband think his wife is just wonderful? The reason we don't have a good picture of that is because of the brokenness that we experience in creation. But in Christian marriages, this is supposed to be the case. That husbands and wives are supposed to delight in one another and celebrate one another and speak well of each other and give each other praise, give each other thanks. It sounds a lot like worship, but not in an idolatrous sense. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm talking about this relationship is we give this glory to one another in response to the love and to the relationship we have. And that is what God wants to have with his people, that he will dwell with his people. He will be their God, and they will be his people. We get to share in the full inheritance of Christ, the Son of God. But right now, while you're living in this world, you and I are called to overcome. We are called to be conquerors, not cowards. We are not to be compromisers. Don't compromise with Babylon. Live with that faithful and hopeful expectation of the day that God makes all things new and brings down from heaven the holy city, the New Jerusalem. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today.